Now that all of the DLC for Fire Emblem Engage is out, I decided to sit down and write a review of the full experience. This will cover everything from the Divine Paralogs to the Fell Xenologues. I felt the DLC was a little hit or miss at different times. Don't worry though, this review will be totally spoiler free. All of the stuff you're seeing in the background is just skirmish maps with some of the new characters from Wave 4, and I left out the really spoiler new character, so we're good on that. I will go into a couple more spoilery things when I talk about the story at the very end of this review, but I'll be sure to give you another warning before we get there and keep those spoilers as light as possible. First, let's talk Divine Paralogs. These encompass the first 3 DLC waves. I've already given my opinions on stuff like the silver card and how the DLC interacts with the game economy, so I'll spare you hearing me repeat that stuff. Instead, let's just jump into the levels and the design of them. Each new emblem, except for the house leaders, give you a new level to play. These levels scale to wherever you are in the campaign, and occasionally that scaling can be a little wonky, particularly in chapters 10 to 15 when units are just starting to class change but a lot of others still haven't. Most of the time though, the scaling works at keeping the levels challenging and fun. 5 extra chapters are a lot of extra experience, and you might have an easy time for a few levels right after you do them, but usually the main story enemies catch back up well before the end of the game, and it didn't feel like it totally broke the level curve to me, at least not in the long term. My problem with these levels are that a lot of them are kind of a slog and not very fun. Engage keeps its maps, especially before you class change, pretty small, which is good because units don't have a lot of move in this game. But Tiki, Camilla, and Veronica all have really spread out and long maps that honestly exhaust me when I play through them. I think it's because these levels all come from their original games, except for Veronica, I have no excuse for that one, and those games tend to have bigger levels. Then in some cases, like Sora, Camilla, and Hector's map, the chapters they pick to base them off of are honestly some of the worst chapters in their original games. Seriously, the volcano map in Radiant Dawn is genuinely one of the most tedious and boring maps in that game. And Camilla's map is a birthright map. Like, everyone knows Conquest had all the good maps. What's so bad about porting over Conquest Chapter 10? Just all around some really weird map choices, and it felt like most of these maps were kind of a slog and annoying to get through. The emblems you get as rewards, on the other hand, are really fun. Most of them have really good theming based on their games and character, making them really fun to use. Yes, some of them might be a little too strong, but they all expand the sandbox of the game in interesting directions, and just give you more toys to play with during the campaign. I wish the levels to unlock them were a little more fun, but I at least enjoy them when I have them, and I feel like I got my money's worth out of the first 3 waves, as having new emblems really upped the base game's replayability significantly. I think the base game still has hours of replayability on its own, since you can play through the game over and over and over again, trying out the new emblems on different characters, and having the same characters function almost entirely differently. Adding 6 extra emblems just makes that even more fun. I'd go as far as to say that the first 3 waves pretty much justify the $29.99 price point in my eyes. And that brings us to the final wave, the story DLC. In 3 Houses, Wave 4 was the only worthwhile part of the DLC, and you basically paid the full price just for it. But with Engage, I think Wave 4 is the worst part of the DLC package. Still not going to talk about the story stuff explicitly yet, don't worry. This is going to be focusing fully on the gameplay of Wave 4 with the Fell Xenologue. In the Fell Xenologue, each chapter has several required units and allow you to bring some of your own. However, each unit, both the ones you bring and the required units, all have fixed, unchangeable stats and inventories. They're basically scaled to specific levels no matter where you are in the game. They gain no experience, don't use the weapons you actually gave them in the game, and do not use any stat boosters you used on those characters. The only thing that carries over are skills and bond levels with emblems, and you can equip emblems freely that you have already unlocked in-game. If you played the Ashen Wolves DLC from 3 Houses or Rise of Deliverance from Echoes, you are probably familiar with the fixed level formula for DLC. Those DLCs gave you specific versions of characters, and the levels play out like a puzzle you try to solve with the units you have. The Fell Xenologue is similar, but actually is nothing like that at all. This is because your inherited skills and bond levels do carry over, and the developers absolutely balanced these maps around having good skills and high bond with the right emblem rings. Also, instead of having specific units you can use, like in those previous DLCs, this game allows you to use any unit who you have unlocked, with some units being straight up better than others. This makes the new DLC really unfriendly for Iron Man games where you roll with permadeath, since you might not have the units that are good still alive or available for these maps. In general, the later game units are absolutely better than the early game units in Engage, and in this DLC that is more true than ever. Not only do late game units like Kagetsu just have way better stats, but many of the later units have stronger, more well thought out inventories too. Actually, a lot of units in this DLC have huge inventory problems. For example, one of the new units who joins you is a flying magic unit and joins at a level full of armor. I thought that was great until I realized she joined with only L Thunder, and I'd have to trade someone for better magic in order to actually be able to kill those armor. A lot of units suffer from not having the right weapon they would need, and while you can trade between your units, units who are dead do not put their weapons in the convoy. For example, Pandreo comes in with a Fortify staff right from the first level, but if he's dead, you're just down a Fortify and have to use a different unit who happens to have Fortify. If all your units who had Fortify are dead, then you don't have that staff. There's a level specifically designed around using Physic to heal a distant target, but if the game didn't decide to give your currently alive mages Physics to start that level, you'll have to get one from a chest instead, which is much harder. So much of this DLC feels based around when you start it and who you have available. I wanted to try to beat it early, so I could use the new units in the entire vanilla game. But that quickly proved to be impossible without lowering the game's difficulty and hurting my very shallow pride. I don't really mind the levels being designed to be hard or requiring the full game sandbox to be used. It's designed to be played when you have all the emblems and kitted out units. That's fine with me. I just wish the game was upfront about that. Instead, the DLC, just like the Divine Paralogs, can be played as early as Chapter 6, even though beating it that early is absurdly difficult. I also feel like if levels are going to be so restrictive on which units you can actually have a chance to beat it with, they should have just given those units to begin with, you know? Feels like IS is saying, yeah, you can totally use Boucheron. Also, we made him an axe fighter, even though Panette starts the class change Berserker, and we gave him no weapons that he can actually get over a 70% hit with. Isn't this fun? On the subject of hit, I think in levels with fixed stats, everyone needs enough dex to hit reliably. Hit rates, even on good units, are really low in this DLC. And you're always in that situation where every enemy has that little 1 to 5% crit chance too. Those things are normal for Fire Emblem when you have units you can raise, as your units usually grow out of those shaky hit and crit ranges, and you can patch up with stat boosters and stuff too. But here, these just aren't units I raised, so I feel punished by the RNG for things I can't really possibly change. One specific unit who causes a game over if they die is so bad that they get one-rounded by everything on every map, average around 30 hit, and do between 0 and 6 damage. And did I mention you get a game over when they die? A lot of levels feel like an escort mission, where your late game units you chose to bring kill everything, while everyone they forced you to have on your team huddle in the corner. Like Radiant Dawn Micaiah, but with less Thanny bombing and more dying. So, as you can tell, I didn't really find the DLC fun. But now that I'm done, I can use my cool new units and have a great time, right? Of course. In that specific save file, at least. Unlike Three Houses, this game requires you to play through the DLC levels every time you want to use the new units in a playthrough, which is a big part of why I'm harping on the DLC being so awful to play at the beginning of the game. The Three Houses system was perfect. Once I finished the DLC once, everything was unlocked in every subsequent playthrough. Why change that? Since all these levels use fixed stat units, you don't really get to customize or change much from one playthrough to the next. I suppose you can use the objectively bad units with no possible resource to salvage them for a run if you wanted. That doesn't exactly sound like fun to me. These kind of fixed level DLCs just don't have any replayability. Rise of the Deliverance had the same problem, where you need to finish the levels each time you wanted the rewards on a new save file, even though the experience didn't change. Three Houses completely fixed this problem, so I don't know why we're dealing with it again. Especially since this DLC was released so quickly, I figured they wouldn't have done that if things like this weren't more polished. But once you do slog through it on normal, right after Chapter 6, you'll have your brand new units for the entire game. 6 shiny new characters that are all absurdly overleveled for where you just got them. Yep, the new characters do not scale to your level. They all come in at level 20 or class change level 1 depending on if they have a unique class. At Chapter 6, they will be way overleveled. Also, the Divine Paralog levels will all scale to your new unit's levels, so now you can't get the new emblems because they're all extremely hard and most of your units will be dying. But if you decide to wait until just before the end game to recruit these units, not only will you not be able to get all their shiny new supports before you finish the game, but they will also be completely underleveled compared to the enemies there. In order for your units to be on level for where you are in the game, you basically have to complete the Fel Xenologue chapters at a specific sweet spot in the game. Basically right after you finish Psalm, chapter 16 or so. And I just don't get it. Again, the 3 House DLC scaled your new units to the level when you recruited them. Is that such a crazy thing for me to ask for? That the units be around the level of my other units for the part of the story I finished the DLC at? Like, why even let me do the DLC early if it's going to be absurdly hard and then give me units that are too strong for me to use and have fun with? But if you do finish it early, you do get access to 2 new class change items for 2 new classes. And the new classes are fun. The Mage Cannoneer gives you a lot of cool new siege attacks that scale off decks, which sounds super fun to use. And the new Enchanter class gives us our first real consumable item-based class. Both of these are super cool and unique, and well worth finishing the DLC early to do a run with them. I was thinking it would be so cool to do an only Mage Cannoneer run. Doesn't that sound super fun? Well, too bad. Mr. Nintendo says no fun. Yes, you are looking at the actual price of the class change items. Once you get the first one for free, you're going to have to pay more than it costs to finance a small nation. And I mean that literally, the max level of nation investments are cheaper than that. There goes my full party Mage Cannoneer video. Sorry, I didn't want to play your DLC the exact way you wanted to, Mr. Nintendo. How absolutely foolish of me. What bothers me the most about the Fel Xenologue is how anti-fun it inherently is compared to the Divine Paralogs. It's like the 2 types of DLC were made by entirely different people, and maybe they were. But I finished the Fel Xenologue on 2 separate files now, once on normal and once on hard, and I'll probably do it once more on maddening just so people don't tell me to get good every time I complain about it. And then I'll think I'll never going to play this again. It sucks that these cool units and classes will be absent from most of my future playthroughs, and I hope they patch it so all that stuff is available in new files after you beat it. But the experience just doesn't change enough to make replaying those levels worth it compared to the many layers of depth and replayability the main game has. Alright, it's time to talk about story stuff. For those of you leaving, my final verdict is that the DLC is worth it for the Divine Paralogs, but if the Fel Xenologue is what you're interested in, I wouldn't pick it up until some of the more annoying bits have been patched. If you need a number, let's call it a 6 out of 10 as a whole experience. Okay, it's time to talk story. I'm not going to spoil the really big beats. I wasn't even going to talk story at all until certain things pissed me off enough that I felt it was necessary and affected my review. If you are like me, and seeing incest in your Fire Emblem games makes you very sad, I would skip this one. If significant age gaps in romantic relationships between one person who acts like an adult and another who is written childlike makes you uncomfortable, I'd give this DLC a pass. Or play it and skip all the cutscenes pretending the story is about something else entirely. Right around Chapter 5 of the Fel Xenologue, the game goes into full problematic mode. I'm sure the incest relationship is between 2 characters who aren't actually related for some reason, similar to the Fates siblings, and I don't care. I'm sure the canon ages of the age gap characters are actually fine, and I don't care. I hate this stuff. It makes me uncomfortable, and it left a sour taste in my mouth after the story was over. If it's gonna make you feel the same way, just skip it. I kinda wish I had. And that's my review. I wish it hadn't ended on such a dour note, but I felt that really had to be mentioned in order for me to feel good about this review. If you liked my video, thanks for watching, maybe hit the subscribe button. We do a lot more Fire Emblem stuff here, and a lot of other strategy games sometimes too. And you'll probably see a lot more videos you like if you subscribe. And with that, I'm off. See you next time.